I'm scripting this one because of my tendency to babble on. Also, I've been pulling off watching some of my favourite YouTube creators until I can get my own authentic thoughts out there without being influenced by anyone. So, let's do this. This review will be mostly spoiler free. So, I finally saw Superman. Or was it Superman Legacy? I could have sworn that was going to be that title for a while, a bit like how Squid Game Season 3. Wasn't that originally going to be Squid Game Season 2 Part 2? I don't know. I guess I'm even babbling when I'm scripting. But, like many, I was intrigued from the initial buzz and the promises of a more positive superhero experience. Also, like others, I started getting reservations later on with the leaks about such wondrous things like mutant monkey trolls taking the American out of Truth, Justice, and the. Also, filling the cast with so many spin off characters, we were in danger of having a Justice League Part 2 situation. Ultimately, though, the final judgment can only come from viewing Gunn's creation itself, so was it a super triumph, or was it hashtag super shit? Well, annoyingly, it's a bit of column A and a bit of column B, and even though I have been mentally digesting this thing for about 4 days now, I still can't definitively say if it's very good or very bad. And annoyingly, I think I know why. It all kind of comes down to my personal bias and history with the DC universe. Let me explain. So, I got into comics relatively late in life, sometime in my mid 20s. I was and still very much am a DC guy more than a Marvel guy, though I'm probably more of a Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman guy than I am a Superman fan, though I do love Supes. He kind of inhabits this weird place in superhero comics. Simultaneously, he's the most iconic example of a superhero, and yet also one that is considered less interesting and even boring to many, due to him being somewhat overpowered. I do not share this view, by the way, but it's a popular perception that does need to be acknowledged. As I said, I like Superman and his supporting cast of characters. There are some damn good comics from both his series as well as crossover events, and I adore many of his on screen adaptations. Loved the Superman animated series, a good amount of his big screen outings, and I absolutely adore Smallville. It holds a special little place in my heart. All of these pieces of media I feel do a great job of exploring the Man of Steel and his surrounding world, even if many criticize him as being a Boy Scout. To that I say, yes, he is a Boy Scout, and it's a good thing. Much of the appeal in Superman, I feel, is that he is just as much an icon and ideal to strive for as he is a character. I find his strong moral fibre, his idealism, and his willingness to save kittens out of trees to just be damn inspirational. Power corrupts, no doubt, and we have seen so many times over the years the dark take on Superman in such cynical media as Watchmen, Invincible, and of course The Boys. Now, each of those properties have their renown and merit to them, but sometimes it's just nice to have a benevolent god in my stories. And if I'm honest, I'm also getting pretty burned out on the edgy, evil Superman media. For fuck's sake, you're not being even subversive when you do it. We've been seeing this twist since, what, the 80s? Sorry, I not mean to just drag this down a little tangent, but it's kind of relevant to my feelings on the most recent outing as well. So, I should probably just get on with the review. First of all, my feelings on the movie as a whole, it's unfortunately a bit of a mess. The narrative starts with an already established Superman right at the end of a battle with an in universe established villain. He's already sometime in his relationship with Lois, and he's already had some tensions previously with the Justice Gang. Now, I am one of those people who are of the opinion that not every new iteration needs to be an origin story. Characters like Superman and Spider-Man are so well known, there should be no problem just hopping into their worlds for a new adventure with them already established. However, this movie is so busy right from the get-go, it feels like being dropped into Season 2, Episode 5 of The Super Show. Yeah, we didn't need the arrival of the last son of Krypton on a farm in Kansas, but so much of the film feels like it's jumping around situations and characters with a backstory that we, as an audience, have not experienced. And to be honest, as the movie goes along, it doesn't get much better. Events just seem to hop from one to another, like new things are introduced, new characters, new dynamics. Of course, we get new situations all come into play during events, and there's just something oddly disjointed about the progression of the film. It's like I'm trying to absorb one thing, but then the film gets distracted by something else, and then just jumps right over there to the other side of the room, then jumps right over here. One of the early worries I remember for the film was going to be the sheer amount of characters they announced, with the Mr. Terrific, who had Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, in addition to the Metropolis family that was already going to be in the film. It just seemed a bit way too bloated for a standalone Superman movie, and yep, it kind of feels that way. I'm avoiding spoilers, but I will say the scope of the stories and what's happening with these characters just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, constantly being added onto like every few minutes, it feels. And it's just not needed, especially for a first Superman outing. There was more than enough here already to start with, and they really did just try and overstuff the plot to, in my opinion, the film's detriment. So that was a bunch of negatives I just listed off there. What about the positives? Well, there's one thing I feel the movie absolutely nails, and that's the characters and the cast playing them. Darren Cornsweet puts in a great performance as Clark/Superman. Rachel Brosnahan, if that's how you say her name. I'm really not sure. I thought it was Brosnan for a while. Anyway, she's the perfect Lois Lane, balancing the investigative reporter with the appropriate snark. In my opinion, though, Eddie Gathegi absolutely steals the film as Mr. Terrific. Admittedly, he's actually one of the DC superhero characters I'm probably the least familiar with, but I loved absolutely every scene he is in. I was initially skeptical about having Nathan Fillion playing Guy Gardner, but almost the instant he opened his mouth, I recognized him as the abrasive Korean Latin we all love. All the cast, in my opinion, are pretty great. Kudos as well to Nicholas Hoult, an actor who previously starred in a show I absolutely hated when I was younger, but since then has gone and do some pretty great things. Though I do feel his character of Lex Luthor does lack a bit of depth in this film, there is still some fantastic potential there, and he does play it well. All around, I feel the characters absolutely hit the nail on the head of who they were supposed to be. Maybe with the odd exception of ladies' man Jimmy Olsen. It's an interesting choice, but I did not mind too much. There's just like quite a few moments in this, especially with Clark and Lois and the Kents, where my heart just really felt it, and I just got like so instantly wrapped up in their personal stories. So after that glowing review of the cast and performances, would I recommend the movie on a whole? Nope. That may sound strange, but let me explain. There's my issues with the plot, pacing, and general scope. That kind of factors massively in how I view the movie as a whole. For general audience especially, I think it's asking a lot, and even in my praise for the performances, it does kind of come with a massive caveat of bias and my own history with the DC characters. Even while I was watching the film and I was feeling the feelings, it was with a kind of awareness that I was feeling these things because I already have pre-existing knowledge and a pre-existing history with the characters through comics and other adaptations. Like, sure, I was feeling something watching this. I can relate what was happening on the screen with stuff that happens in the wider history of DC Comics. But are these things that the film really set up, or am I just drawing from my own personal history? And thinking about it objectively, I'm mostly just making these connections from other media. The chaotic pace of events in the film itself probably does not set the people in it up enough for the emotional highs for the general audience as it does myself, and that's unfortunate, and almost certainly it's just going to be another victim of the overbloated nature of the film. I'm not sure how well general audience is going to connect to these characters and what's going on. So is this a general recommendation to see in the cinema? Well, as I said, no. Is it a recommendation for hardcore Superman or DC fans? Well, if you're one of those, you've likely already seen it, and you've quite possibly picked apart the film even more than I have just there. Yeah, I'm quite conflicted on my thoughts and feelings of James Gunn's Superman. If I were to rate it out of 5, I'd give it maybe a 2 to a 2.5. Honestly, the movie is just a mess, and it's almost entirely the performances and understanding of the characters that kind of saves it just a little bit for me, but I just don't know if that's going to be enough for like the wider audience. And even though I have been avoiding spoilers, the little buzz I have seen about it is not fantastic. Oh, and I feel like I should mention the whole Jor-El thing. There will be spoilers here for one one of the big plot points of the film, so If for whatever reason you haven't seen it and you're still planning to, just skip the rest of this video. I'm just going to be talking about this. So, during the events of the movie, it's revealed that Jor-El, Superman's late father, sent Kal-El, Superman, to Earth as a conqueror, and there's a infamous lining there about instructing his son to create a harem to spread the Kryptonian genes through on Earth. This has caused some criticism and mockery online, and I do kind of get why. Jor-El, for the most part in media, has been presented as a wise moral guiding force from beyond the grave, telling Clark slash Kal-El how to, be a hero, how to get on with his life, and how to do the best. And kind of turning him almost a twist villain in this movie has rubbed some people the wrong way. But here's the thing, this version of Daddy Soups is not actually without precedent. It's not completely out of nowhere. In Smallville Series 2, when we first hear the voice of Jor-El, he advises to his son's horror that his role is to rule humanity well. There's a pretty dramatic moment towards the end of that season, which leads Clark doing something pretty reckless by the end. Like, so horrified and so concerned about those words from his father. In season 1 of Superman and Lois, which is also a very underrated show, considering it came from the reliable sewage pipe of bad DC media, the CW, there's a holographic version of Jor-El who is very pleased with his grandchildren, potentially carrying on the Kryptonian legacy and the powers. Man of Steel has this really weird plot point, which, if I'm remembering correctly, of Russell Crowe's Jor-El infusing his infant son with the legacy of Krypton via some strange skull device. I don't know, but it's basically continuing the whole thing of being the chosen one to rebuild or carry on the ancient Kryptonian legacy. Right, admittedly, these are not the exact same thing as Jor-El wanting his son to become the Sultan of the super harem of Earth, but it's not totally out of character, and I really don't think it's the same character assassination as some people have played it. We should also remember that Kryptonian society has also produced some fine, upstanding individuals like General Zod, or such wonderful creations like Brainiac. I'm just saying, Kryptonian morality may not quite align with the Western values of Earth. It could also be argued in the Smallville example I gave that his words could be a test, as Jor-El in that show did set many tests for his son to complete. Or it could also just be some resignation on his part that, his son being superpowered on a world of mortals would naturally come to dominate the weaker humans. But this is, of course, in the show and in Superman media, is counteracted by the good nature of his upbringing with the Kents, which is, once again, why I like Superman. He's not a hero because he's a godlike alien. He's a hero because it's the human soul inside that drives him to be a good person and a good man in general. Though I'm not as bothered by the Jor-El character in James Gunn's Superman as other people seem to be, I must admit it has made some pretty good memes. And I thought I should at least mention it here at the end. So anyway, there's my thoughts, and now that that's over, I can finally watch my favourite content creators and find out how much they think I am wrong. But anyway, you all take care now, and I will see you next time.